I never expected to find the tape. It was buried deep in my parents' attic, inside a dusty cardboard box labeled Home Movies. I was helping clean out their house after they moved into a retirement home when I found it. An old VHS tape, no label, just a piece of yellowed masking tape with birthday 1991 scrawled in faded ink. 1991, my 6th birthday. I barely remembered it. Just flashes. Balloons, cake, my dad setting up a camcorder in the living room. Curious, I dusted off an old VCR from the pile of junk in the attic and plugged it into a tiny TV. The screen flickered and static filled the room before the footage began. It started off normal enough. I saw my younger self, a gap-toothed kid in a striped party hat, laughing as my mom carried in a cake. My dad was behind the camera, narrating in that goofy, exaggerated voice he always used for the home videos. "There's the birthday boy, look at that smile." The footage panned across the room, my cousins, a few neighbor kids, the colorful decorations strung up along the walls. Everyone looked happy. And then, at the 4-minute mark, something changed. The footage jumped. The screen flickered, and suddenly, it was later in the party. The room was darker, like the sun had gone down. The guests weren't running around anymore. They were sitting, motionless, staring at something off camera. I frowned. I had no memory of this. My dad's voice was gone. The only sound was the low hum of static. Then the camera turned, and I saw her. A woman, sitting in the corner of the room. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't anyone I recognized. She was too tall, her limbs oddly thin. She wore a pale, almost white dress, and her long black hair hung over her face. Her head was tilted slightly like she was listening. No one else seemed to notice her. Not my mom, not my dad, not the kids. But as the camera stayed on her, I noticed something even more unsettling. I, my 6-year-old self, was staring right at her. Not smiling, not laughing, just staring. The footage jumped. Now the kids were gone. The cake was half-eaten, forgotten on the table. My mom and dad were cleaning up, chatting casually. And I was still there, still sitting, still staring at her. The woman in the corner hadn't moved. The static hum grew louder. The camera zoomed in slightly, and for the first time she shifted. Her head twitched toward the camera. And then, the tape cut to black. The screen stayed dark. The low static hissed through the speakers. And just when I thought the tape was over, one last frame. A close-up shot of the woman with the most horrifying expression on her face. She turned toward the camera and with a jerk, smiled, showing teeth that didn't seem human, and then her face seemed to melt with her eyes sinking into just black holes. I ripped the tape out of the VCR. My hands were shaking. I didn't remember any of this. I called my mom that night. "Hey, weird question," I said, forcing a laugh. "Do you remember my 6th birthday? Do you remember who was there?" She paused. "Of course, honey. Just family and some of the neighbor kids." "No strangers?" She sounded confused. "No, why?" I swallowed hard. Did anything weird happen?" Silence. Then a hesitant chuckle. "Well," she said, "you did something strange that night. We never told you because it freaked us out." My heart pounded. "What?" "You kept talking to someone in the corner of the room." I felt my stomach drop. "We thought you were playing pretend, but you really got upset when we told you to come to bed. You kept saying she needed to stay." I gripped the phone tighter. "Who?" My mom sighed. "You called her the birthday girl." I didn't sleep that night. And in the morning, when I went back to the attic to grab the tape, it was gone.
This story happened when I turned 10, and I have never been able to let it go. I am 35 right now and have my own kids. I make it a point to never hire clowns at their birthday parties. It was supposed to be a small birthday party, just family and a few close friends. I had just turned 10 and my parents wanted to keep it simple. They set up the modest party in our backyard, with balloons, the homemade cake, and a clown they'd hired last minute to entertain my friends and me. The clown, however, was strange. I will never forget the eerie feeling I had when he showed up. My mom found him through a Craigslist ad. Mr. Jingles, he called himself. No website, no references, just a phone number and a price too low to pass up. When he arrived, he was already in full costume, an old-fashioned tattered clown suit with faded red and yellow stripes. His oversized shoes scraped against the pavement as he shuffled toward the yard. His face paint was uneven, smeared at the edges. His grin stretched just a little too wide, and his eyes, they didn't belong on a clown. They were deep-set, sunken, and dull, like he hadn't slept in years. "Hello, birthday girl," he said to me, his voice low and scratchy. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, frozen. My mom said he felt a chill when they talked about it years later. "Oh, kids, say hi to Mr. Jingles," my mom encouraged, but none of us moved. My dad laughed nervously. "Tough crowd, huh? Let's get started." The clown didn't perform tricks. Instead, he stood in the center of the yard, motionless, watching us. My friends and I shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other. Then, without warning, he pulled out a handful of crumpled paper and lit it on fire with a match. The flames danced in his palm before he clenched his fist, extinguishing them. I flinched, while my friends gasped. My mom forced a laugh. "Wow, okay, let's maybe stick to balloons." But Mr. Jingles didn't have balloons. Instead, he leaned toward me and whispered something in my ear. My face turned pale. I turned to my mom, eyes wide with terror. "What did you say to her?" my mom demanded. Mr. Jingles straightened, smiling. "Just a joke." My mom's stomach twisted. "I think we're good here. We'll still pay you, but I'm not done," the clown interrupted. The backyard fell silent. My mom grabbed my hand. "No, I think you are. Please leave." Mr. Jingles tilted his head, eyes locked onto me. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. I learned the next part of the story from my mom just a few years ago, when I asked her about my 10th birthday. She was very reluctant to talk about it. But after a little persuading from me, she told me what she remembered from that day and what followed, which I had no real clue about because they didn't let me know what was happening since I was only 10 and they didn't want to scare me. That night, after the guests had left and I was in bed, my mom and dad sat in the living room exhausted. My mom scrolled through the photos she had taken. Pictures of me blowing out the candles, kids playing, the table full of snacks. Then her thumb stopped on a picture. It was from earlier, before the party started. She had taken a photo of the decorated backyard, everything set up but no guests yet. It was supposed to be empty, but it wasn't. Standing in the far corner, half hidden behind the trees, was Mr. Jingles. My mom's breath caught. "Mark, look at this." My dad leaned in, frowning. "That's impossible. He wasn't here yet." My mom's fingers trembled as she flipped through the pictures. In each one, he was there, always in the background, always watching. She jumped up. "I need to check something." She hurried to the kitchen, grabbing the guest list she had made that morning. She and my dad had counted everyone as they arrived. 12 kids, 6 adults, 18 in total. Her hands shook as she counted the faces in the group picture. 19. Someone was there who wasn't supposed to be. Her breathing turned shallow. Mark, there's an extra person. My dad grabbed the photo, his face draining of color. Oh my God. It was Mr. Jingles. My mom ran upstairs to check on me. I was asleep, curled under my blanket, but as my mom leaned over to kiss my forehead, she saw something that made her heart nearly stop. A folded piece of paper sat on my pillow. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. It said, "See you at your next birthday, Mr. Jingles." My mom staggered backward, covering her mouth. Her knees went weak. My dad rushed in. "What's wrong?" She handed him the note. His hands tightened around the paper, his breathing ragged. "We're calling the police," he whispered. My parents searched the house, checked the locks, and then called the cops. But the police didn't see any sign of forced entry, and my parents and I hadn't seen anyone inside the house. The police took a report, and they didn't seem too concerned. Probably just a prank, one of the officers said. My mom didn't sleep that night. Neither did my dad. Every noise made them jump, she said. Every shadow felt like it was watching them. And then, at 3:13 a.m., the doorbell rang. My mom and dad froze. Slowly, my dad grabbed a baseball bat and crept to the front door. He peeped through the peephole. Nothing, just darkness. But when he opened the door, his stomach lurched. Sitting on the doorstep was a clown's red nose, and next to it, a single balloon. My mom said she yanked my dad back inside and locked the door. They didn't go back to sleep. A whole year had passed after that scary incident. My next birthday looked different. I didn't have a party. I didn't invite anyone over. And we definitely never hired another clown. But when my mom went to wake me up in the morning of my birthday, she found something that made her blood run cold. A folded piece of paper. And on it, scrawled in smudged red ink, were 2 words. I remembered. After my mom told me what had happened the day of the party, and finding the note a year later, she asked me if I remembered what the clown had whispered in my ear during the party. She said that I turned pale and looked very frightened when he whispered, but I never told her what he had said. I suddenly felt dizzy and weak in the knees, as if I was going to collapse, when the memory rushed back to me. I looked at my mother, fear contorting my face. My mom reassured me that it was okay to tell her, but I am not so sure about that. I hesitated, but continued. "Mom, when the clown whispered in my ear, he told me that now we will always be friends, and that we will always be watching. Until the day I die." Thinking about this makes me wonder, is what he said true? Is he still watching?